Hi, I'm Gabriel and this is Learning English Path. And in this lesson, I'm going to teach you how to improve your English listening by either focusing on listening for key words or listening for gist. What is listening for gist? When you listen for gist, you are listening for the general meaning, all right? You're listening for what the conversation is generally about. You're listening for the context of the conversation, or maybe it's not a conversation, maybe it is a news report or something like that, right? But you're listening for what is generally being spoken about. And the best way to do this is to pick out key words, right? So you're listening for key words. So what does this mean? For example, I've had a lot of students who I say, okay, you're going to listen now, all right? And then they hear the first few words and they don't understand what's being said, and then they turn right off, right? They switch off and say, oh, I don't understand. I don't know, right? I don't understand after like 3 words. And this I always used to find irritating as a teacher because I knew that they could understand the gist if they just stuck with it a couple more seconds, right? So when you're listening to something, whatever it is, whether it's the news or a conversation, listen for the words you do know. If you hear a sentence and you don't understand a word of it, then okay, listen to the next sentence. You might get a clue as to what the last sentence was about, right? And this is, it comes down to just not giving up, right? Not giving up on trying to understand the conversation. Because when you do when you do hear some of the key words, you might be able to get the basic idea, the general idea of what's being said. For example, if you heard someone tell a story for 2 minutes, right? 2 or 3 minutes, and all you understood were the words swimming, river, crocodile, and bite, could probably get a good idea as to what they're talking about, right? Even if they're talking really, really fast, too quickly for you, and you don't understand most of what they're talking about. And then they're using big words, complicated words, and they talk in a heavy accent, and they're using connected speech, right? You miss most of it, but you hear the words swimming, river, crocodile, bite. Guess what? You probably have the gist of what they're talking about. Okay, so listen for key words, words you understand, and then put them together and ask yourself, these words together, what might they mean? And if you're lucky enough to hear full sentences and put full sentences or expressions together, even better, right? Now, some common questions if you're in an English class that you might get when listening for gist are, what happened in the story? Or what's the problem? Or what are they talking about? Or do they like swimming or do they not like swimming? Or do they like something or do they not like something? What do they think? What do they think about this? Okay, these are the kinds of questions that you would get when you are listening for gist or listening for general comprehension. Now, what if you're listening for detail? When you're listening for detail, you're listening for specific information. Okay? So you're not just listening for the words that you know. You're listening for certain keywords. So if there's a word that relates to the information that you know you're listening for, then open your ears very carefully and focus on that, right? So you might be asked, for example, to listen to a weather forecast and to listen for the weather in your area. If that's the case, then you want to listen for when your city or your town name is spoken, right? Because then you know to listen for it. But you want to be careful in that situation and pay attention to whether they say the weather first and then the town, or the town first and then the weather, because then you could get them kind of mixed up, right? So listen for specific information like that, and then the weather, and then you can kind of zone in on what's important. For example, have you ever been in a large room and you suddenly hear your name, right? It's not with the person you're talking with. You're only paying attention to the person you're speaking with, but then you hear in another conversation in that room, someone says your name, and your ears pick up, and then you're like, oh, someone said my name, right? But you don't know the context. But suddenly now your ears are listening to that conversation because it's relevant to you. So it's a similar situation. When you're listening for specific information, you're listening to relevant details, right? So it could be a weather forecast. It could be something like a statement in a court case, right? And if you are trying to find out whether someone is guilty or not guilty in a court case, then you will listen for very specific evidence, very specific information in the case, probably, right? And some specific questions that you might get if you're listening for detail in an English class, or something like, how many, blah, 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 or who, blah, 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 or what color is blah, 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 or even why questions, right? Questions about giving reasons. And that's a slightly more complex one than what color, right? You need to listen for the reason for something. So it's quite critical to have certain words or expressions in your mind that you know might be related to the information that you want to listen for. And it's important to know whether you are listening for gist or listening for detail, because it impacts how you're going to listen, right? Whether you're going to listen for words you know or expressions you know, or whether you're going to listen for specific words ahead of time. Usually in an English classroom, you will have the questions before the listening exercise, before you listen to the conversation, if you're listening for detail. Whereas if you're listening for gist, you probably get the questions after you listen to the conversation or the speech or whatever it is, okay? So I hope that helps. It's very important to know, are you listening for gist? Are you listening for detail? And see you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And make sure you click that bell so that you know when I publish a new free lesson here on YouTube. And if you want to learn English with songs, then don't forget to click the link in the description to get my free PDF guide to 101 songs to learn English. I have hundreds of exercises for you to study English, English grammar, English vocabulary, English idioms, practice your English listening, and even your speaking while listening to the very best songs to study English with. All right. And when you get it, then you also get my weekly email with 5 words of the week, where I teach you another 5 words every single week so that you continue to take your English language learning to that next level. All right, my friend, I'm Gabriel Wallace. Keep learning and keep going.